On October the 1st of 1962, during the Cold War, a B-59 submarine set sail from its base in Kola, Venezuela to the Caribbean Sea. And within it would be one of the Soviet Union's largest nuclear weapons. But shortly into this trip, a US air carrier alongside 11 destroyer vessels spotted the submarine, causing the US to drop hundreds of explosives on it. So in an attempt to dodge these so-called depth charges, the submarine went down into the ocean, causing all forms of communication to fail due to the low signal. This meant that the crew of the submarine could not follow orders from Moscow, leaving them completely stranded. It wasn't long before food supply was starting to run low, and the submarine was either forced to launch its nuke or risk going onto the surface to resupply and potentially be killed. The ship's captain wanted to launch the nuke, for which they needed the approval of 3 senior officers on board. Luckily, one of the officers rejected the idea, mentioning how little explosives were actually used in the bombs. And he turned out to be right. The submarine went to the surface without being attacked by the Americans and was ordered to return to Moscow. You see, if this guy had agreed with his fellow officers, it would have sent the world into a nuclear war, likely ending all life on Earth in the process. And this was one of the closest moments we've ever been to nuclear war, but this volcano was 100 times scarier to witness. You see, over 70,000 years ago, a massive volcano nearly eliminated all life on Earth, sending the planet into an ice age that lasted over 1,000 years. A lake in Indonesia was home to the largest volcano ever spotted. And when this thing erupted, it sent more than 2,800 cubic kilometers of molten rock into the atmosphere, killing millions of animals and crops that were near the impact. The debris reached heights of over 400 kilometers, which is over 5 times higher than the Mount Everest. The sheer amount of debris caused all the sunlight to be blocked, causing the Earth's temperatures to be at an extreme low for the years to follow. The eruption most likely also caused the strongest earthquake ever seen, but it's still not agreed upon by scientists just how powerful it would have been, though it's safe to say it would make the top 3 ever recorded. It's actually a miracle of how species survived this, since it led to crops dying all around the world due to the lack of sunlight and cold weather. It's still the largest recorded volcanic eruption of all time. I for sure hope it stays that way for a very long time. Kind of like how the Black Death should never return as well. Imagine you're standing in the middle of an open town. The clouds look dark and stormy, and a forest near you is on fire. And now imagine you suddenly died from coughing. Yep, that's how serious this virus actually was. The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, was one of the most devastating pandemics in human history. It was believed to have originated in Asia, where the first plague first arrived in Europe in 1347. It then spread rapidly throughout Europe via trade routes, being transmitted primarily through black rats, which were commonly found on merchant ships and cities. The disease was extremely deadly, to the point where almost 60% of Europe was killed in a matter of years. The doctors knew very little about the disease at the time, believing it was God punishing people rather than an actual illness, which is a big part of how it's claimed so many victims nowadays. The Black Death was also a huge issue in Asia, but it's unclear just how much it treated society, as there's not really much documentation around the actual incident. If the disease was around for longer, the effects would have been unthinkable, as it already killed more than 50% of major cities during the 17 years it lasted. Modern scientists believed that quarantine was a massive part in how they got control over the disease, but as life-threatening as that disease was, things could have gotten way worse on September 26th of 1983. A computer in the Soviet bunker reported that an intercontinental ballistic missile was heading towards the Soviet Union from the United States. If this was a real missile, it would trigger a strategic concept known as mutually assured destruction, meaning that the Soviet Union would have retaliated by launching the majority of its nuclear weapons to the United States and Europe. The crew inside of the bunker only had few minutes to guess if this was a real threat or if it was a computer error, as there was no other way to prove the threat to be real or fake. If the crew made the wrong decision, it could lead to the Soviet Union launching its arsenal of nukes, which would lead into an all-out nuclear war. So trusting his instincts, the lieutenant colonel refused to notify his superiors of the potential threat, believing it to be a false alarm. He believed that if this was a real attack, the US would have sent hundreds of missiles, and to their relief, nothing happened. It turned out that the false alarm was caused by a rare alignment of sunlight on clouds that had hit the satellite, and after several more close calls, it was taken out of service. But if the colonel hadn't followed protocol that day, it would have ended humanity as we know it, kind of like how in 1999, over $800 billion was spent to counter the Y2K bug. The Y2K bug is known as one of the biggest possible computer bugs ever recorded, with close to $1 trillion going into preventing it from happening. The bug came into existence from the way that computer systems worked at the time, because computers would only read the last 2 digits of a year, meaning the year 2000 would be the exact same as 1900. Predictions of what this bug would cause ranged from planes falling out of the sky to nuclear missiles failing, which would have ended up causing a nuclear war. So pretty much anything that used a computer at the time was vulnerable to the bug. Even things like electrical grids and prison systems, all at risk. Fear of the bug started in 1959, which is the first time that the US government would begin to spend money on the problem. It started with just $1 billion, but as more predictions of the consequences came in, more money would begin to be spent, to the point where close to $1 trillion went into updating all computer systems in the US alone. The Americans were not positive that the Russians were capable of updating their nuclear systems at the time, which is for a short while tensions were at the same height as during the Cold War, kind of like the tensions that were seen on September 17th of 1966. Where a B-52 bomber plane carrying 4 hydrogen bombs took off from a base in North Carolina. The bomber was sent on a routine mission over the Mediterranean Sea, which required it to be refueled mid-air using a tanker aircraft. And although this was commonly done at the time, it was still a risky move for them to take with 4 bombs in the bag. But while attempting to refuel this bomber, 2 planes collided, causing all 4 of the nuclear bombs to fall down and nearly explode in a village in Spain. The impact caused the explosive payloads of the bombs to scatter radioactive plutonium all over the landscape, causing the entire village to be evacuated. Luckily, the bomb safety systems prevented this from actually exploding, which is why it would have been the worst nuclear explosion ever recorded in human history. A similar event actually happened in 1958, where the United States lost an 8,000-pound nuke in a plane crash, which is still not being found all the way to this very day. In total, the US is still missing 6 of its nukes, and it's scary to think about those hands that they might have ended up in. But that's not as scary as the training tape incident. The training tape incident was potentially one of the worst human errors to ever happen. You see, on November 9th of 1979, the US early warning systems detected a large-scale incoming Soviet nuclear strike. A threat assessment conference was held immediately in order to discuss strategies, while at the same time the US started preparing for a full-scale counterattack involving thousands of nukes. The president's so-called doomsday plane was also launched in case the US mainland was bombed. However, within minutes of the original alert, the officers had reviewed all the raw data from satellites and checked early warning radars across the country. And that's when they found out someone was getting fired in that office. As it turns out, someone had mistakenly entered a training tape into the computers that ran the country's early warning systems. This little mistake caused all the country's warning systems to go off, which could have very well started a World War III if the US responded any sooner with its counterattack. Imagine being that guy that put in the tape. Honestly, I would just quit and move far away out of shame. But did you know in the next few thousand years, WR104, a triple star, is expected to explode in a supernova? And as a result of this, it's predicted that the world will produce a so-called gamma ray burst that could very well end all life on Earth. These bursts are extremely energetic explosions that are called the most powerful class of explosions in the universe by NASA. And these things are no joke. They shoot out a massive ray of gamma, which will completely set our atmosphere on fire, which will kill at least like 75% of the world's population. And these things look like a literal Death Star from Star Wars when they fire. And as deadly as the phenomenon will be, it does look really cool. We've talked about nuclear bombs a few times so far in this video, but this video wouldn't be complete without talking about the man behind it all, Mr. Oppenheimer. While they were developing the first ever nuclear bomb, there was a real scare that this device could start a chain reaction to destroy the entire Earth. Now, obviously it didn't happen, but the threat remained there until the very moment it was tested, and to everyone's relief, nothing happened. Well, outside of a nuke going off, of course. Though it wasn't fun for all people who designed and tested this bomb, however, as diseases such as heart disease, leukemia, and other cancers started appearing in families of scientists that worked on this bomb. But actually, I got a question for you. Did you know that there's a volcano sitting dormant that would wipe out our entire planet? You see, unlike usual volcanoes, this supervolcano is actually mostly underground, stretching around 30 to 45 miles in size. This has happened 3 times from this exact same volcano, spewing more than 240 cubic miles of volcanic materials, which for comparison is just as big as the country of Ireland. It would be so detrimental that it would plummet the world's temperatures and kill up to millions of ecosystems. The volcano is currently dormant to this very day, but it could easily erupt at any given moment, shoving the entire planet into a volcanic winter for up to thousands of years, meaning that there may be another moment that the world might end in the coming century. It would be so detrimental that it would plummet the world's temperatures and it would kill up to millions of ecosystems. This volcano is currently dormant to this very day, but could easily erupt at any given moment, shoving the entire planet into a volcanic winter for upwards of thousands of years, meaning there might be another moment where the world comes to an end all the way into the coming century. And the only reason it hasn't so far is by complete dumb luck. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, click the one on screen. YouTube thinks you'll like it, and we do too, because it's actually a pretty good video. Okay, bye bye now.